Another memory came crashing in on Revan, triggered by the words of his friend. Mandalore the Ultimate lay dying at his feet, coughing on the blood welling up in his lungs. He reached up and peeled off his mask, the most sacred symbol of his people.
It wasn't supposed to end like this,
he said, his voice soft and low.
They promised me victory. Only now do I see how I was betrayed.
Revan tilted his head to the side, puzzled.
What are you talking about?
They tricked me. We were never meant to win this war. They used me and my people to test the Republic's strength.
Who used you?
The Sith.
The recollection ended abruptly, slickly back into Revan's subconscious, but in bubbling up to the surface, it had released a host of other trapped memories, and they crashed over Revan like a wave, staggering him.
I remember,
he muttered, placing his hand on the wall for support.
I remember.
What?
Canderous asked anxiously.
What do you remember?
Revan didn't answer. Instead, he crossed the chamber to the sarcophagus in the center. Carved into the granite sides was an interweaving pattern of circles and diagonal lines, most likely a family crest or seal. The tomb's heavy stone lid was smooth and unadorned, but as Revan drew closer he could see marks and scratches along the edges, signs it had been moved several times. Reaching out to the force, Revan focused on the lid. After a moment it began to move, the edge grating along the lip of the lower half of the sarcophagus as it slowly rose into the air. Careful not to let the heavy lid drop, he moved it off to the side and gently lowered it to the floor. Then he stepped up to the sarcophagus and peered inside. There were no remains to be seen. The enemies of the anonymous Sith Lord in the tomb must have found him after all, stealing his mummified corpse for some dark and twisted purpose. The missing body didn't come as a surprise to Revan, and he suddenly remembered that he and Malak had also found the sarcophagus empty. But they hadn't left it that way. Inside was a datacron, a small cube similar to those used by the Jedi and Sith to record their teachings for future generations. However, unlike those powerful artifacts, the datacron was not created using the Force. It was simply a repository of information, but Revan barely looked at the datacron. His attention was gripped by the object that lay beside it, Mandalore's mask, and as he reached in and picked up the sacred relic, his mind flashed back to the moment he had left it there.
So Mandalore was telling the truth,
Malak said.
Did you really think his last words would be a lie?
Revan asked.
Now what?
We have our proof,
Revan said.
The Sith are not extinct. They have to be stopped.
What about the Mandalorians?
Without the mask, they are nothing,
Revan said, placing the mask inside the empty sepulchre. The memory ended, rudely snapping Revan back to the present. He lifted the mask and held it aloft so Canderous could see. The big man walked slowly toward him as if in a daze. He didn't speak, but as he approached, his hands came up almost involuntarily, his fingers reaching out toward the lost symbol of his people. Neither noticed Veela and the others enter the chamber.
How dare you defile Mandalore's mask with your filthy Jedi hands?
Veela shouted, breaking the spell that had momentarily enthralled the two men. Revan looked up to see her standing at the cavern's entrance, flanked by the other climbers. All 6 Mandalorians were armed with blaster pistols, their muzzles aimed directly at the 2 men standing by the crypt.
Veela,
Canderous demanded.
What do you think you're doing?
Put the mask down and step away from the crypt,
she commanded, ignoring him. Boldly, so as not to alarm anyone, Revan placed the mask back in the crypt.
Abner fought beside us,
Canderous protested.
He led us to Mandalore's mask, and you repay him with betrayal.
Veela barked out a harsh laugh.
Who are you to talk of betrayal? You turned your back on your people. And for what? To throw your lot in with Revan the Butcher.
When did you figure it out?
Canderous asked, not bothering to deny the truth.
Once he revealed himself to be a Jedi, it was obvious,
she said with a sneer.
Especially with that name. Did you really think rearranging Revan into Avner would fool us?
This isn't about him,
Canderous said.
It's about me, isn't it?
Veela bit down hard on her lip, but didn't answer.
I'm not here to claim the mask for myself,
Canderous assured her.
You're the rightful leader of Clan Ordo. I'm not here to challenge you.
You still don't get it,
Veela said, shaking her head.
You're supposed to be our leader, not me. You were our greatest warrior. You were our champion, our hero. When Mandalore fell, you should have been the one to take his place.
She looked at him sadly.
Instead, you abandoned us. You abandoned me.
I'm sorry.
Canderous said softly.
When our clan fell apart, I was lost. I had to get away. I didn't know what else to do.
You could have stayed and helped piece it back together.
Veela insisted, her voice cracking slightly as she lowered the blaster in her hand.
Synthesized,
Canderous said.
I can't undo the past, but I'm here now.
That's why I didn't tell the others in the camp.
She admitted.
I didn't want to destroy your reputation by telling them you fell in with Revan.
You didn't tell them because you were afraid they would agree with me.
Canderous countered.
Revan is not our enemy. Not now. Without him, Clan Gendry would have slaughtered us. Without him, we would never have found Mandalore's mask. Revan has proved himself to be our brother, and what you are doing brings dishonor on our clan.
No.
Veela insisted.
You're wrong. Clan Ordo might accept a Jedi, but not him. Anyone but him.
There's only one way to be sure. We let the whole clan decide.
That's not an option.
Veela replied, raising her blaster back up.
Revan cannot leave this chamber alive.
You know Revan's reputation.
Canderous warned.
And mine. There may be 6 of you, but do you really think you have a chance against us both?
We're not here to kill you.
Veela told him.
Just him.
And you expect me to stand by and do nothing?
I expect you to join us.
Veela shouted.
You are Mandalorian. Clan Ordo is your family, not Revan. You have to choose him or us.
It doesn't have to be this way.
Canderous said evenly.
Lower your weapons. End this madness. We'll take Mandalore's mask back down to the camp together.
This is your last chance, Canderous.
Veela said.
Choose.
Her hand was trembling, making it difficult for her to aim. But the other 5 held their blasters steady and true.
You can't win this battle.
Revan said quietly, speaking more to the others than Veela.
We killed dozens of Jedi during the war.
Veela answered grimly.
But I am no ordinary Jedi.
Veela,
Canderous pleaded.
please don't do this.
Her shoulders slumped, then she let out a sigh of resignation.
Kill them both.
Revan was in motion, his lightsaber flashing to life before the words had finished spilling from her mouth, as Veela and 2 of the others, reacting slightly faster than the rest, fired their blasters. The green blade transformed into a spinning, twirling arrows used to deflect the bolts back in the direction of the shooters. One of the deflected bolts struck its mark, taking down the woman on Veela's left. Canderous and Revan dived for cover behind the sarcophagus just as the other Mandalorians opened fire. Canderous popped up briefly to fire, sending the Mandalorians breaking for cover. There were a precious few places to hide in the open shade, however, and Canderous took 2 of them down before they made it to safety. Veela and the other 2 survivors scrambled back into the passage near the chamber entrance, ducking out of sight around the corner to regroup. A second, later trio of grenades skidded across the floor, bouncing and rolling to a stop near the base of the sarcophagus. The instant before they detonated, Revan reached out with the force and hurled the heavy stone lid of the sarcophagus toward the grenades. It acted as a shield, absorbing the worst of the blast before exploding into pebbles and dust. The explosion was deafening, though, the concussive force strong enough to knock both Canderous and Revan off their feet. As Revan struggled to stand up, the only sound he could hear was a high-pitched ringing in his ears. Veela and her team seized the advantage and charged into the room, blaster pistols blazing, all 3 aimed at Revan, who just barely rolled clear in time. From the corner of his eye, he saw Canderous lying on his stomach, arms stretched out in front of him to brace his pistol on the floor as he took careful aim. An instant later, Veela went down from a clean kill shot through her heart, their attention drawn for just an instant by the body of their leader tumbling to the floor. The 2 remaining Mandalorians faltered. Revan used that moment to unleash a Cygan throw of his lightsaber. The blade went spinning out in a wide pulsing path that ended both their lives before they could move. Revan adeptly caught his lightsaber by its hilt as it returned to his hand, then slowly stood up straight, his ears still ringing. Nearby, Canderous still lay on the floor, frozen in the same position he'd been in moments earlier. Slowly, Revan approached him, trying to see if he was injured. The big man didn't move until Revan reached down and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then Canderous snapped his head around in surprise. He mouthed something, but Revan couldn't hear what he was saying, so he only shrugged in response. Canderous pushed himself up off his stomach and onto his feet, leaving his pistol on the ground. He walked over to where Veela lay face down on the floor and rolled her over. Her eyes were wide, gazing unseeing up at the ceiling. Tenderly, he closed the lids, then folded her hands over her chest. Then he stood up straight and turned away, staring off into an empty corner of the chamber. After a few minutes, Revan went over to stand beside him.
I'm sorry.
His voice sounded strange to him. His hearing was still distorted by the grenade, and he wasn't sure if Canderous had heard him.
I'm sorry.
He repeated, this time more loudly. Canderous turned his head to look at him.
Me too,
He answered before turning to stare back at the wall, his words hollow and flat.
Me too.